Greg. It's really been a pleasure. I have learned so much today already. So thanks to our speakers and my little breakout group. That was awesome conversation. Yeah, Greg asked me to talk a little bit about some of the things I'm seeing with churches in terms of where things are headed or what the future kind of looks like. So I love the practical things we've been looking at now of what can we be doing today. But I do want to share a little bit about some of the trends we see. And as we've mentioned already today, the pandemic and the shutdown and even some of the things we've experienced, at least in America, around race and reconciliation, all of those things have really catalyzed many movements we were seeing in churches before that time, but it greatly accelerated it. So some of these things, I don't know that any of this will be really radically new information, but I do think we have to pay extra special attention to them because these trends are coming at us much faster. And I would say, as someone who's been around the leadership world since the early 90s in church ministry, which is, does age me as I have a big birthday coming up next month, I am sort of amazed at how we've not listened to God sort of giving us warning signs about this. Some of these topics have been talked about for a long time. So I do feel the urgency to be talking about these really with concrete handles for churches when I work with them now, because we don't really have a choice but to adapt and adopt some of these mindsets. It's not really a choice anymore. It really is going to be the thing that allows us to exist into the future and at the very least be effective. So I've got 5 kind of trends that we've been seeing the last couple of years. I think they're actually getting more strong as we go. The first one is that every church is now a global church. Every church is now a global church. Again, this is one of the trends we saw, particularly in multi-site before the pandemic, which was sort of this morphing of church planting and mission work with multi-siting and campuses. Those lines were starting to blend. We find ourselves really shifting from traditional mission ministry mindsets from sort of the last 50 years into a more multiplying campuses or church planning network. And many of our mission organizations globally are now turning into campuses. Even what we were talking about earlier with 12 Stone at Home, like that really has limitless boundaries around it. And once all of us went online, someone's mom or their sister-in-law in a different state, or, their college roommate who's doing an internship in Thailand, like those people are now coming to our churches. And when we think about assimilation in general, we've always known that pre-assimilated people adapt into church faster. We tend to think of them as individuals, as if they're coming to church and they don't know anyone. And we're going to put them in this process and stick them around a table and put them in a small group, and then they'll have community. Most people, the majority of people, come to church knowing someone. And so if we can sort of link into that relationship that already exists and then expand it, we have much better longevity in our assimilation process. And so I really encourage churches, even if they're not doing a lot online, the potential to be a global footprint church will always be there. And because nursing was my first career, I'd hate to be the one, if I'm the first one to tell you this, but this is not our last pandemic. And so we are going to have more of these things, whether it's a viral outbreak or some other kind of challenge that's going to make us all be online again. I just really encourage churches to keep the online global mindset and just really pray about where God has opportunities for you already there. We see in multi-site a lot in communities that have strong turnover, military bases, or places like New York or Seattle, like we've talked about, have a lot of transient. I live in South Florida. People just don't live here for very long, maybe 2 to 3 years. But the ability of people to move in pockets and start church congregations or small groups is just really accelerating. And the Great Resignation has only encouraged that. And so I just want to encourage you to be looking at that. I think it's the wrong assumption to think that people aren't at your church anymore because they don't like Jesus or they were only consumers. Most people I know who have stopped going to church or who are doing only online or sort of disenfranchised really love the Lord. And it's actually their conviction about what they want their Christian faith community to feel like that is driving them to reinvent. And so we've got great opportunities. I love the ideas that we've already shared here. I think we need to keep innovating in that. So the second one is that connection is the new excellence. Connection is the new excellence. We used to think that excellence was the thing that kind of set us apart from the world, or at least from our parents' church, but really connection. And I don't want to belabor the point, we've hit on that multiple times today. I think we are still to see the tsunami of mental health needs come at us. And so churches that can get their systems around care and connection These are no longer felt needs. I think sometimes we kind of talked about people have felt needs for their marriage to be better or for their finances to be okay or for their mental health. Those aren't felt needs. Those are actual needs. Like they're real needs. And so it's only gotten more accelerated. I'm concerned that the last 15 years, I've seen a major trend in churches to drop their counseling and pastoral care programs. Most senior pastors brag about the fact that they have no counseling skills and don't have gifts of mercy. I think that is a tragedy. And at the very least, we should stop announcing that to people because people really are looking for help and hope. And if we celebrate the fact that we don't, coddle people, we really are missing the great awakening that is happening around this topic, but it's also happening for spiritual, because you really can't, as most of you know, because you've studied spiritual formation, you cannot separate spiritual formation and emotional development. And so care for the whole person is really the ministry of the future. And so making sure that we're not so worried about our lights and sound. People don't care. Everyone's doing stuff on their phone. If you spend any time on TikTok, they don't care about excellence. Wear your hoodie, come out with bad sound. They still watch it. Where we need to refocus our time on real care of people. And I love the ideas that everybody shared this morning. Third is leadership agility is the new baseline. Leadership agility is the new baseline. And many of you know our 5-year plans, our 3-year plans, our 6-month plans really are not relevant anymore. And so that idea of leadership agility being the combination of great strength and great flexibility. And for the most part, up until the pandemic, churches could be one or the other. We could either be really strong. These are our convictions. This is our culture. This is our strategy. We know what we're doing. We're multiplying that really connected way, or they could be highly flexible. We kind of have this new idea. We want to rearrange everything. We want to go with the new thing that's happening. Agility is the ability to be both at the same time, to have really strong culture, really strong conviction, a really clear vision, and also be flexible and adaptable so that we're not married to the mission, but we're married to really where we're headed, and we can flex on how that works. We're not married to the strategy. We're married to the mission, and we can flex on the strategy, sometimes daily, oftentimes weekly. I think we're now finally at the place where people can make really good 3-month goals. But if we're making 6 and 12-month goals, we still are just not realistic about the economic challenges that are up to come, the political unrest that's going to be around the next election, and the racial tension that I think is going to swell again, because we were really good for a little while, and then we've sort of dampened it down. You can even see it in our Christian sort of spaces. We're not paying enough attention. That's not going away. It will come back. And so making sure as we teach leadership, we're not going back to books from like 1999 or 2005. We're really focusing in on agility. There's a lot of great stuff online about that. There's not a lot of great books written about it because it's a little fresh in the real leadership literature, but focusing even with our young leaders about how to be both strong and flexible. Number 4 is remote work is here to stay. And even though a lot of us have reopened, I don't think that we have fully embraced the digital age and the great resignation, especially among churches, and how our culture has shifted. I think the great innovation around remote work is not so much about our staff. I think it's about our volunteer revolution that we have yet to see happen in our generation. For most of us, myself included, I travel a lot for work. I have a lot to offer my church. I mean, I've got a lot of experience. I've been walking with the Lord for 35 years. I want to be involved, but if I can't make it to the Sunday night leadership rally, I don't get to know what was there. If I can't do a small group at the place and time they want, I still have a hard time really being able to disciple people in the way the structures of my churches have. And so I'm someone who could actually be on a leadership, I'm just using myself as an example, as everyone else in the room, but we have high capacity leaders that could be on our leadership teams, that could be leading initiatives. If our church staff would be willing to think more in terms of remote and flexible staffing organizations and less in terms of our staff runs the church and we're the us, and all of these volunteers help us lead church. Instead, we need to think more gathering, that we, the church, are us. And our leadership, we really have to reclaim, I think, Ephesians 4, where we equip the saints for the works of service. So what would it mean to take someone like me and give me a 10-hour-a-week assistant from the church to run a ministry for women, or to run a small groups ministry, or to lead a leadership development initiative. I could do that through a virtual assistant and a virtual team way easier than I can commit to even leading a small group of 8th graders that I had to give up because my travel schedule kicked in again. Like, I would love to do that, but I can't do that. But if my church could flex a little bit and embrace not remote work from staff, but remote work to engage volunteerism. And the great thing that COVID did is it absolutely trained every one of our volunteers to be on Zoom. Before, trying to create these sort of virtual leaders was very difficult because we couldn't get grandma on Zoom, but grandma knows how to FaceTime and Zoom now. And so we really can utilize what COVID did for our congregation. And then the last one is we have to fight for diversity of all kinds. We have to fight for it. I would say before COVID and really the racial reconciliation in our country, which is more than just race, because I'm a huge advocate for gender and physical ability and the ageism I see happen in church. But we really could kind of get away with making sure our postcard and our website had a few diverse people in it. Maybe the worship leader was a person of color. You know, hopefully we had one person on our pastoral ranks that could sort of represent. We really are not in a place that our culture will tolerate that any longer. The number of people I know looking for churches with diversity at all levels is astronomical, and the number of options is very minimal. And so I believe that as Christians, we've had to fight for things all of our life. We've not done a good job actually fighting for this. We've kind of looked for opportunities. When a Black guy walks in, we take him to lunch. You know, all 7 staff people take him to lunch. We hope he can sing. Like, we can't live opportunistic on race or gender or age anymore. We have to fight for it. So you have to go after it in your congregation. You have to recruit differently. We need to operate our leadership development pipelines differently. High schoolers and college age students are the places we have to go after this, because they don't even see or experience all of those things that we get stuck on in our minds. And so I think the other generation that we need to really look at is the boomer generation that is aging and more available than ever and has more funds available than ever. They're one of the top populations leaving the church right now, that and professional women. 2 huge influencers to be able to hand the kingdom off to the next generation: our spiritual maturity, our financial resources, and the people who control a family's calendar. And so if we don't make sure we're going after that, engaging that. So I would say even in our connection strategies, I would prioritize moms, I would prioritize boomers, and I would prioritize college students in terms of building connection and giving care. So if you have to pick and choose, make those the center of your target. And so to do that, as we see really the church reinventing off of Sunday morning and into whatever will be next. We're in the messy middle right now. The church reinvents itself every 500 years. We're a little late. I've been praying that I will see it in my lifetime, and I think I'm going to. But it takes 20 to 30 years. It's going to be the 16-year-olds of today are going to be the church leaders who reinvent the real church that's going to be the next model. So I have 3 suggestions for making sure we steward the messy middle well. The first is to make sure you stay informed. Our tendency will always be to go with what we know because it's easiest and it makes sense to us. So we have to stay informed. Being in webinars like this, I think Carrie Newhoff and Barna are the 2 people. If I were to only do 1 podcast and 1 blog, those would be who I would listen to every week, Carrie Newhoff and Barna Group. They're doing the best research and making most technology available to us. The second is to stay connected. Denominations and our old networks are really not going to serve us in the next 100 years. And so finding places like this, reinventing who your tribes are, participating in cohorts, those are really the next iteration of denominations, are these cohorts. You see everyone. Ligon Group has them, Exponential's launching some, Leadership Network has them. Making sure you find your people and work those connections. It's the gift of social media. So we can build all of those things out. I really recommend that. And then the last one is to stay calm. So stay informed, stay connected, and stay calm. The messy middle is messy. As long as we focus a little less on success and being the one with the new book out for the strategy and a little more on faithfulness and love of our people, we will make it just fine. It's made it every reinvention of the church. If we stick to faithfulness and love of our people, we will make it, but we do have to stay on our toes about it.
Wow. Mic drop. Man, that's amazing stuff. Thank you, Katie. Thank you so much. Really, really good stuff. I'm going to open it up to questions. We'll take a couple for Katie first. And then if you have another question of Ashley or John or David, I'm going to take a risk here and say, unmute yourself. If you have a question, just ask it so we can hear your voice. Who has the first one? Come on now, don't be bashful.
Okay, I am literally just paging through all of these notes. That was incredible, Katie. Literally blown away. That was amazing. Thank you. I loved what you had to say about like empowering and engaging remote leaders. Are you finding that people are still willing to engage in digital discipleship environments? Like, what does that mean? Are they leading like remote Bible studies, ministries? Are people still interested in that?
I really think it's a strategy to use for leadership and for your meetings. Like rather than having your small group leader meetings on site, like give your small group leader the gift of a remote meeting so that I can meet with my small group in person if it's possible. But even if it's not, it can be normalized in the way that we do work. So my family, who still lives in multiple states, we still do a Zoom family meeting. We're more connected than we've ever been before because Christmas once a year just wasn't enough and a random phone call. There's something about the community of online versus one-on-one that's different. But what I'm trying to advocate for is that we think about how to use our leaders' time more wisely with the gift of online and engage more leaders because of it.
Very good. Another question.
I got a question.
Yeah, Chuck.
For Katie. You talked about connection as the new excellence, and that kind of goes back with what John Torres was talking about, being radically inefficient and purposefully ineffective or effective, and with a willingness to be ineffective if you have to be. Flesh that out some more for me about connection and making connection a new excellence. How do you get that across to staff, to leaders, particularly in the church that's kind of stuck in traditions? How do you do that?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest paradigms we have to overcome in most church settings, I would say there are a lot of churches who still really prioritize relationships and care of people, but the majority of larger churches or churches who have been sort of doing sort of modern church strategy is that we really have kind of built a lot of our mindsets off of business, which is very customer focused. So there's a sort of a mindset shift of we're going to create this for them. And I know we criticize people about being consumer Christians, but I would say that customer mentality, even the way we measure our metrics, is very business minded versus more family minded. So if we think about church, which is the paradigm or the metaphor I love from Paul the most in the New Testament, that church is a family. We don't do just like a head count around dinner and we're like, 2 people are missing, let's eat anyway. Like we notice who they are and we go after them. And I think business mindset versus most of our senior pastors right now are gifted in evangelism and leadership. So we've got great vision, great evangelism, but we're sort of missing a lot of the other giftedness at our leadership tables. And that's part of the diversity we have to fight for, is having all of that, all of the gifts in 1 Corinthians 12, Romans 12 at our leadership table, making those decisions. So we end up rallying around messages like, we're going to leave the 99 and go after the one, which is what God does. But really, when we're shepherds, we care about all 100 sheep. And the reason we can leave to go after the one is the 99 are healthy and together. Most of our churches don't have 99 anymore. We got maybe 22, right? And they don't really like each other. And so we have to make sure we're sort of rebuilding that 99. And so part of it is this sort of like, I can leave behind and go after the lost person versus really thinking of us more like a family, less like customers, more like spiritual children. I'm not a business who creates a product that I measure how people like. I'm a spiritual parent who is nurturing and developing my children, my spiritual kids. And so all of that kind of mindset language change, I think, is going to be the thing that's going to have to come forward. I see it in the next generation who cannot get enough of mentoring or connection or sort of being poured into. And if you look at generational theories, the first generation we have that has a completely broken family system. I'm a Gen Xer, so I had really broken parents, which is why like the show Friends and small groups came up with my generation. I really think mentoring is the next generation, and the millennials and Y and Z. I think it's the mentoring models are the thing, because the need for mentoring and parents and grandparents is insatiable. So those are some kind of practical ways that I think we rebuild our systems with a more caring connection model.